And welcome to another episode of King Arthur and the Lady of the Lake. My name's Michael Laurier, and this is my beautiful co-host, Helen Glover. Welcome, Helen. And we have decided to touch on a subject today, which I'm going to be honest, it triggered me the other day. So I'm going to tell you the backstory, and then we'll have a chat. I'm not going to even pretend that this didn't affect me. So I'm scrolling through my news feed, looking for something, and I come across this post, and I'm going to read something to you in a second, but I came across this post, and it was a lady who had purchased a puppy, and the puppy was very cute, and she was talking about how wonderful it is to have a puppy, etc., etc. And I thought, oh, that's really beautiful. And one of the comments underneath that caught my eye, and I'm going to read this out to you. Another lady on her friends list, obviously, had commented on this post about the puppy, and she said this. She said, "He's very cute, but remember, puppies are like men. You have to train them well in the first weeks, or they become useless for the rest of their lives." And so that really got to me, and I'm going to be honest, I'm going to explain why. Because I've seen this double standard out there on social media, more so on social media than in real life, okay? More so on social media. And the double standard is this. If a man were to say something like that about a woman, there would be an absolute uproar. And I've seen this happen on social media. There's an absolute uproar when a man says something degrading, demeaning, minimizing, or marginalizing against women. Absolute uproar. But when a woman does the same thing, it's passed off as a joke. And in fact, I commented on that post, and I commented on that lady's comment, and I said, that's pretty disgusting that you would think that that's appropriate to speak about men, right? And so about a day later, and I'm going to read out to you what she said. About a day later, the person who posted the comment, the person who created the post about her puppy, this was her response. "Michael, she was just joking," followed up by, "My friends can post whatever the fuck they want on my page." And I wanted to share this today, and I reached out to Helen and I said, can we do this on one of our episodes? Because I don't think that a man would get away with such a dismissive attitude if he were to say something similar. What do you think, Helen?
Yeah, you wouldn't. Simple as that.
No.
And obviously she didn't either. So it is actually about us calling out the stuff that's difficult. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've seen a guy roll up and say, "Oh, for goodness sake, take a joke."
Yep.
It's the same thing, right? So I hear you, and I respect the fact that you did that. And I'm also cringing for the woman who did it, because I know that she would have said it in the lightness that men say it when they're being light. Do you know what I mean? That there's this, we've grown up with a misogyny and with a sexism that's so deeply ingrained in our society
Mm.
that it means that people don't pick up that this is not funny.
Yep.
And so almost picking up that it's not funny becomes as offensive as the comment itself, right? So that's what I've noticed a lot, is that as soon as you call out the behavior,
Mm.
it's also this kind of uncomfortable cringing. Oh God, I know it was unacceptable. I didn't want to say anything because, and that's what we're dealing with all the time with when we're saying to men in the locker room, stick up for women. Don't let
Mm.
people, speak about us like that. Don't, constantly belittle or minimalize or, denigrate us in
Yep.
your conversation. So it's
Absolutely.
just the same. Right. So
It
yeah, I
it
hear you
really
on
is.
double standards. Yeah.
And look, I'm not saying that I've never seen men treat women badly, because of course I have. And when you talk about the misogyny, it's definitely very active out there. And I would hope not as much now as what it used to be, but it's definitely was a big deal quite a while ago. And even probably even recently too. You see it sometimes in social media in some of the men's groups that I'm in. You'll see, and I'll give you an example, because Yeah, I'll give you an example. So in one of the men's groups I'm in, there was a guy that put a post up about how he was feeling and what was happening in his life, and then he put a photo up or a picture that he'd gotten off the internet of a girl scantily clad, like she was in some kind of lingerie, posing seductively on a car, and he said, "Picture for attention." And I tell you what, it was so encouraging, and I was one of these men, so encouraging to see so just as many men stand up and say, "Hey, don't be an arsehole," right? As what it was other men saying, "Oh, look at," saying something lewd about her and
Mm,
about the photo. And
mm,
so it was really encouraging to see. In fact, there was probably more men that were going, "Hey, do you need to post that photo to bring attention to your post?"
mm,
And
mm.
so
Yeah,
it's good to see men calling out men on that behavior. I
mm,
would love to see women calling out women on
that's right.
that behavior as well, because on that particular post, there were a bunch of women there are a bunch of women who are laughing and posting pictures of, men on all fours with a woman standing over him with a rolling pin.
Mm.
And once again, it just goes to a different level. It's like that's even more degrading.
It's like 20 years ago what was happening with women. And so there's this shift now where, like you say, men have started stepping up. And I remember, I chatted to somebody about this last year, and he said, the first time I stood up for women, I was terrified. He said, it's so frightening to be in a group, like you know, the kind of the boys club, and to go, hey mate, that's not appropriate.
Yep.
He said it's just awful, it's uncomfortable, it's terrible. And we're at that point now with the opposite, because before, really, there wasn't so much, it was mainly there was more attention on women being kind of denigrated by men.
Yep.
And you get that with all of, you'd walk into a garage and there was all the kind of, Playboy bunnies on the wall, and that was normal. Even though women might
Mhm.
work there, it was like, you just have to cop it, sweet. So
Yep. Yep.
we've
Yep.
been working on that for a hell of a long time. So if anything, we should really know how that feels, right? We should really, really know how that
You
feels.
would you would you would imagine so.
Mm,
You would
mm.
imagine so.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
there's almost like this attitude of revenge now. That's what I'm seeing. It's almost like an attitude of revenge, because there was another lady that commented on the post, and it was like, well, now you know how it feels.
yeah, yeah.
Now you know how it feels. Women have been treated this way for years, decades,
Mm.
and now it's our turn. And it's like, I
Yeah.
wonder if I don't think that's the solution.
It goes against everything, doesn't it? And I
It
feel that
does.
too. I totally hear you. That a lot of women are saying, yeah, because there's been, and and I think this is maybe where we're at. There's been a rising of women to say, hey, hang on a minute, that's not appropriate. And like we talked about before in our equality conversation,
Mm,
women have had to fight, really fight, to get to where they've got to today. And thank God they did. But there's a
yep,
point now where it's kind of like, well, then let's use this for good, right? Let's kind of then not repeat what we've had happen. It's like watching bad
exactly.
behavior and meeting it with bad behavior, rather than
Mm,
kind of saying, well, I do know how that feels. And so I'm not going to do that to you. I'm going to be bigger than that, because
yep.
it's about coming together rather than constantly kind of one-upmanshiping each other.
Yeah, it should be about unity, really. And look, no excusing the behavior of the past. Absolutely no excusing it. And I'm not the sort of person that condones this from men to women or the opposite, right? Um, my beautiful late mum used to say to me so many times, Michael, two wrongs don't make a right.
Mm,
And I'm sure we've all heard that. And this is what I'm seeing. I'm seeing that it's just becoming a power play, like a revenge game now. It's like, well, here you go, we're going to dish it up to you. It's the same stuff that I see, those excuse me, fireman calendars that you see out there now. And and they are there. Like, it blew my mind. About 3 months ago, we were walking into Woolworths, my wife and I, Amanda, walking into Woolworths, and there's a guy dressed up in a fireman's outfit, handing out calendars. And he handed it to my wife and he said, hey, do you want one of these? And she ripped into him. Good on her, right? Ripped into him. She said, how dare you? I'm here with my husband and you asking me to buy that. And that guy felt so small as a result of that. And it's like, I wonder if I stood there trying to sell men lingerie calendars of women, I wonder how that would be received. Yet it's perfectly acceptable for these fireman calendars to be handed out in the middle of the supermarket with kids around and everything, right? Plus, you see people, women posting this on social media. Some, hot guy at the kitchen cooking breakfast for her or something, and it's like he's full of muscles and he's lean and all the rest of it. The perfect specimen, right? The perfect physique. And she posted on, so I've seen this before, women posted on social media and the comments underneath
Mm,
about, oh, look at him and wouldn't I like a bit of that and a piece of this and whatever. And of course, whatever. Again, where the double standard is, if a man did that and it was opposite, he gets absolutely smashed. And there was an
mm,
example of this about 12 months ago. There was an ad for Aston Martin, right? And the ad said, and it was this absolutely beautiful young woman standing there at the kitchen bench, um, very seductively, right? Very seductively, in almost nothing. And the ad said, you're not the first, but do you even care? And it was advertising secondhand Aston Martins, right? That was acceptable. Apparently, that was okay for an ad. A guy put it on his social media and he said, "Hey, look at this," and all the guys underneath. And then women smashed him, right? And then they had to remove the post.
mm, mm. Yeah, yeah.
But the opposite is not true, and this is where I think I have the issue. The opposite is not true. It would be perfectly okay if the odd person did this and then were called on that behavior,
Mm.
and then they remove the post, or it just wasn't deemed appropriate. But when you have women doing it and it's okay and men are too scared to call them out, but then you've got men that do it, women call them out and men just cower in fear, that's not where we want to be either.
I think as well that I mean, for a long time, I mean, I know that when I've gone to kind of, the I can't even remember what they're called, but the men's strip shows. Like I went to one of those. I was so grossed out by the whole experience, and like there were women screaming and lobbing themselves at the stage, like it was so foul.
Yeah, it's
And
pathetic.
and I remember thinking, like, we feel disgusted about men going to strip joints, and here we are, like there's women literally, like, it was gross. It was so
Yeah,
gross.
and they say it's
And I
just
get
fun.
that it was
It's just
fun,
fun.
but the same's going on for men, and look, I've been in a couple of men's strips clubs, not working, just, in there with
Just
drinking.
just to be clear,
That's
everyone.
right, thank you. And we'll have none of that. And so, but and I actually don't find them too disgusting. I just think that there's women there, they're not. But like, actually, the men's strip shows are more disgusting because they get women up on the stage and they lay on them and they do stuff, and you know what I mean. It's a very different experience, and so obviously I don't think either are great, but and if they all still go on, I don't have a problem with that. But what I have a problem with is one being worse than the other.
Yep.
I think it's like, look, this is going on. Let's recognize we're both doing it. And that's where the double standards thing is. It's not about constantly stopping what's happening. We can't control what's happening all the time. It's about that if it works for one, then it should work for the other. And we've all decided that comments against the opposite sex and comments that are about sexually denigrating another
Mm,
person, or
mm.
putting them up as something that, um, yeah, just something that's not appropriate, that we should then find that unacceptable. So if we've all decided it's unacceptable for women, then we should all decide it's unacceptable for men.
And what's
So,
interesting is this speaks into what we talked about last week, which was around equality.
mm,
And we talked about equality, right? So I think that's really quite relevant here, in that if it's okay for women to do that, then it should be okay for men to do that. Not that we want to, not that I want to, right? I don't want to fill up my newsfeed with half naked women, but the point is that it's got to be, as you said, not okay for both
mm,
sexes, right? And we have to make sure that the women regulate the women and the men regulate the men. I think that's really important too, and that we learn
yeah.
how to regulate each other.
Yeah, and double standards as well. There's so much more in this, you know, with the double standards, and it's not just about kind of social media posts and scantily clad men or women. It goes to what's appropriate to say to a woman when she's out in public, and it goes towards, you know, what's appropriate as far as kind of the dating. So a man
Yep.
sleeps with a woman, you know, oh, what a legend. A woman sleeps with a man, oh, what a slut.
Yep.
All of that's been going on forever and a day.
Yep.
Or this, you know, when there's different comments around. I'm just trying to. I had an example in my mind before, and it's gone now. But there's so this speaks into so many different things other than just derogatory comments about sexuality. It's across
Mm.
the board about a number of things that if a man says it, it's okay, a woman says it, it's not, and vice versa.
Yep. Yep.
And that it's not understood that we're both dealing with the same set of problems as well, that we're both dealing with the same kind of hurts, and
Mm.
that women are pushed into kind of being beautiful all the time. But now I see a huge push for men to be metro men and to have this kind of, you know, way of dressing and way of appearing and what our wish list is. And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
we're not recognizing that. It's always kind of like, you know, oh, with women, we've always got to look good. Well, actually, men are being pushed into that as well now. So
Mm.
even the
This is
difficult,
what we were going to talk about today, wasn't it? It was about body shaming, I think it was, for men, which we'll talk about next week now. But but yeah, and I think the other aspect of this as well is that it becomes about objectification too, and I think we have to recognise that. And I suppose this is getting into a different part as well, that women who choose to do that, like what we're talking about before, and we'll just say women who choose to objectify themselves and men who choose to objectify themselves, like, I have to ask then, what do they expect? What
mm,
do they expect, right? If you're going to pose for a camera, or are you going to be a stripper in a strip joint, or you're going to be a male dancer in that regard, like, you have to expect that people are going to look at you. If you put yourself in that position, then yes, of course, people are going to look at you. And then if you feel objectified, then you've got to take responsibility for the fact that you're placing yourself in a position to be objectified,
mm,
right? And if you don't want to be, then don't put yourself in that position in the first place.
mm,
So
mm,
I think there's also, when we go a little bit deeper into this, there's also personal responsibility too for these people who are choosing to do that.
mm. As well, there's a lot of stories behind the people who are in this kind of work, you know, and it's kind of, so should they choose to be sex workers, or should they choose, you know, to have roles that put them in this space, men or women, they
Mm.
should be allowed to make that choice as well without being kind of told that they are something that we get to judge them, you know, if it's their own personal choice. So, but there's you know, within this as well, there's kind of things such as the Harvey Weinstein thing.
Yep.
Women came forward and spoke up. Thank God that this finally happened and a lot of behaviors were called out. But then on the other hand, men will come forward and say, actually, I was sexually harassed by women in the workplace. And it's like, oh my God, mate. And it's not taken seriously. It's like, why didn't you
Yeah.
enjoy it? What is wrong with you?
Mm.
You know, it's a compliment. And I wish my boss would sexually harass me. Ha ha ha. So as well, there's the added thing that men aren't actually allowed to come forward and say that they feel either objectified or sexually harassed, or that
Mm.
they
Or
have
else there's
had
ridicule, isn't there?
difficulty and sexual abuse as well. So Terry Crews came forward in the Me Too movement. I think I mentioned this before, and he was really shamed. Like, this is a woman's movement, and he was like, "No, it's not. It's Me Too, and I'm saying Me Too."
Yep.
And I noticed that, and it's the same for domestic violence. You know, or you're just weak, or you're a pufter, is one of the things I've heard. If you get hit by your wife or your spouse, like, what is wrong with you?
Some of
But
the stuff,
it's
it's
okay.
like,
It's acceptable for men to beat women, though. It's kind of like, well, yeah, men don't do beat women, you know, but women don't beat men.
yep.
Underneath the kind of calling names, there's a point where we're accepting that one person kind of does do it, but another person doesn't,
Mm.
and that
Mm.
you're tougher if you do the beating, but you're not tough if you get beaten. It's just that whole, you know, rabbit warren of like, you know? So there's there's so many double standards in the shadow of our society. And do you think that that's what it is, Michael? Do you think it's because it's in the shadow side that we don't want to talk about, that we don't want to see it, recognize it's uncomfortable?
Everything that's uncomfortable is in the shadow, sits in the shadow, of course. We know that. And with this particular issue, when we're talking about double standards, I think there's been such a history over hundreds, if not thousands of years of there being this, and there has been, I have to admit, there has been more against women than what there has been within against men in history. And now we're seeing this shift, and the shift is going the other way, where I think the shadow of maybe the shadow of the feminine goes, we've been oppressed for so long, now it's time for us to be the oppressors, and we're going to do everything we can in whatever way that in whatever way that we can get away with, that is going to make the men feel oppressed.
Mm, mm,
And I don't think it's I'm pretty confident that for 99% of women, it's not a conscious thing. I know they don't get up in the morning and go, how can I oppress men today? Right? I know that's not the case. And I know it's only a very small minority of women who actually do feel that way. But I think there's that shadow, that unconscious aspect of people, and it can be men as well, right? Like it's men too, men who have been treated badly in relationships with women, and now they live a life of, within men's rights activist movements and all that sort of stuff, where then their shadow comes out. So I think there's a lot of, short answer to your question, Helen, is yes. I think it definitely sits within the shadow of feminism, and also the shadow of the men's rights movement, where we feel like we're being victimized in some way, and that there needs to be some kind of revenge to suppress the opposite.
mm,
Yeah,
mm.
in some
Yeah.
way. Yep.
Yeah, it's funny because I saw a documentary of a women's rights group in America, and a woman is running this group. So I was interested in it because obviously I work with men, and I was like, oh, great. But it was terrible what they were saying, and there was a man in there. Um, and the t-shirt that he had on was so disgusting about women, and
Yep.
this woman patted him on the back and laughed at his t-shirt, and I wondered what was going on there, and I just thought, we're never going to solve anything by inciting in the other direction.
That's
And
right.
there's a book called Women, Men, the Whole Damn Thing by David Lesser. He's a
Mm.
journalist in Sydney, wrote a book. And it was very hard to read because it's all about what has happened to women at the hands of men through the ages. And what he was getting at is that it's important to notice that in order to make a difference.
Yep. Yep.
And
Yep.
so, and I think that's what you're just saying, that yes, we can recognize where we've been, and it's uncomfortable actually even seeing it on paper, because um, I'm so in the lane of wanting us to come together,
Mm.
but we're not going to do anything from then flipping it the other way.
Yep.
It's absolutely ridiculous to do that, right?
I agree, and that speaks into. I'm just writing some notes here because I don't want to forget, because we go into all these different directions in these conversations. So it's almost like the son must pay for the sins of the father, right? And that's what I'm really seeing in our society. It's that, okay, well, previous generations treated women badly, and I can accept that, and I can acknowledge that, and yes, that was the case, and yes, it shouldn't have been like that. But it's like, we are a different generation now, and different generations, and it's like, I think we have different mindsets, and we shouldn't be living so much in the past. And I could speak into so many things here, but really it feels like that the sons are paying for the sins of the father, and the grandfather, and the great grandfather, and further down the line, because I don't see I don't really see evidence of women being oppressed like what they believed that they were, and probably were in many instances, in generations past. And so this is where those men's rights movements that you were talking into, just as toxic as those far left feminist movements as well,
Mm,
just as toxic. But it's good that they sit on opposite ends of the spectrum, right? Because there's a good space in between where you and I sit, people like you and I, where we can speak into these things and we can start to maybe create some unity and connection, which
mm,
I think is where we need the direction that we need to be headed in. And
yeah.
like leave revenge, leave rights in the past, and let's talk about responsibility instead of rights, because everyone's up in arms about these are my rights and this is my right to do this and my right as a woman and my right as a man. I think we could talk more into responsibility. What responsibility do I have as a man to be the best quality man that I can be, and honor women and honor children and do the right thing by everyone, no matter their sex or orientation, and just be a good quality human being. And for women, like, how can I be a good quality, excuse me, person and contribute to this in a way that honors everyone,
Mm,
right? And I think we all could do well to step into that energy instead.
mm. And I have to say, I get what you're saying with that. There is still a long way to go on the
I
ground for
agree.
our
I
current
agree.
things.
Yep.
So, whereas I hear what you're saying about sons paying for father's behavior, still a lot of the sons are doing the father's behavior. There's a lot of people who are still, they just don't post it. They just don't, they're not able to say it out loud like they were. There's not the same freedom, which is a start to show those behaviors, but certainly they are saying them and doing them in the home. They are talking about them in the pubs. It's still a lot there, and that's why you're working with men to kind of bring attention to that. That's why there's so much amazing men's work being done at the moment to kind of bring forward a new level of man that can
Mm.
step into the greatness as an equal.
I've
And
got to
so,
say, sorry, Helen. Yep.
yeah. So yeah, I think that we still have a lot of way to go. And for me, I know that I've been brought up. I was brought up in an era where, I just should kind of dissolve to a man's kind of niceness towards me, and that everything was very sexualized during my life as a young woman.
Mm.
I remember sitting in a interview for a job, and the woman turned her back to me, and she was on the phone with a prospective employer, and she said, "Look, she's got an accent, but she's quite pretty, and I'm sure she'd be lovely to have around to look at."
Oh,
Right. So yeah. So what
and
I'm
some
saying
people
is
might say, well, Helen, what are you complaining about? There's compliments in
that's
amongst all of that,
exactly
isn't there?
right. And so I actually got up. She had her back towards me, but I got up, walked out, went down the stairs, and walked out the door before she'd even realized I'd gone. She was still talking. And I said to somebody, blah blah blah, and I walked out. What an appalling thing! I was only like 18 or something, and I was told I
Yep.
was an
Yep.
upstart for walking out on that what
Mm.
was wrong with me, that I should have just, that it's probably true that I should be lucky to get a job, that I was, all of the excuses on the book. And this is by women, not necessarily by
Yeah,
men.
but also, let's put some perspective around that too. And we're not going to give away our ages here, even though neither of us are ashamed of it. But that would have been close to 3 decades ago,
Yeah, yeah, it was. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Very different society 3 decades ago than what it was now, than what it
But
is
that's
now, I
what
should
I'm
say.
saying is the sun's coming through now, yes. But I grew up in that, and I know all of the men that grew up beside me.
Yep.
We're now the ones who are in this pot, and not
Mm.
everybody sees that it's wrong. So
Yep.
there's only a set part of society that's going like that's inappropriate, and we are able to kind of assist the people coming through that not to do what we've done, kind of thing,
Mm,
where that
mm,
kind of
mm, mm.
breaker generation of breaking the pattern.
Yep.
But I think there comes a point where some women were they just relented to it, and other women fought, and so there's a defense there that I think exists in our society that we have to start to drop.
I agree.
So we've been defending, but now maybe we can drop away that defense, and we can start kind of going, okay, well, maybe they didn't mean it like that, but we still need to draw attention to it. And rightly so, the other way around, that then if we're asking for that, then we need to draw attention to what we're doing in the other way that's also
Mm.
disrespectful and not okay. you know.
Yeah, I agree.
Mhm.
And it's encouraging to see though that there are more men in pubs being more respectful and more, not that I frequent pubs, but the men that I do hang out with, and maybe this is just the people that I choose to, that either in my circle, but whether they're in my circle or they're in men's groups, I'm seeing a much greater percentage of men now actually stepping into something a lot more respectful and a lot more appropriate in terms of their behavior. And I'm also seeing a lot of women stepping into that and going, you know what? Um, we're noticing that. We're starting to notice that, and we honor you for that as well. And
Mm,
rather than it being a revenge game, it's like, yeah, cool. Thank you. Like, I've had so many women say to me, thank you for the work you do. And even the wives and the partners of the men that I work with, I get private messages from them saying, thank you. Whatever you're doing, it's working. He's such a much better partner, father, just a better man in all aspects. And that doesn't mean that the man has all of a sudden just become a submissive little puppy. It means that he's stepped into his innate masculinity at a more powerful, higher level, and he's now being of service and contributing from that place as opposed to the other place that he was, which wasn't healthy. And
mm.
so there are so many more men stepping into this work now and doing good things out there, and women are recognizing. So the tide's turning, and I think that's a really good thing, Helen.
Mm. I think it's going to be really, really fabulous to ask our audience, what's your experience? Because this is where people are passionate about this. And I want to know the people who are still struggling in that space. What is your experience? What do you see on the ground?
Yeah.
Is your experience our experience? Because, Michael, we do work in these circles. So we do surround ourselves with people who really echo chamber ourselves into what we want to be surrounded by, right? Which
Yeah,
is
yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's
so
like we have our own little personal algorithm, isn't it?
as we should, right?
As
So
we should.
yeah. So it's going to be interesting what really, and I'd ask each person on listening to this, rather than getting enraged, just sit with it and see whereabouts in your body is this really hurting you?
Yeah.
What part of it is triggering, and what is it triggering? And why? And
Mm.
then, is there anything that you can personally do about that? Is there anything that you can do to change that within your life? Is there something you could be stepping up into? So it's going to be interesting to see what people's experience is on listening to this,
Absolutely.
because yeah, we do come from a space where we are calling the shots on our lives, and we're not accepting that kind of behavior, and so the people we hang around don't do it.
Mm.
Hmm.
Cool. Well, I think that's a wonderful place to finish off. What do you think?
I think so.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again, everybody, for listening and watching, I should say, to King Arthur and the Lady of the Lake. And we'll look forward to seeing you on our next episode. And we're going to be talking about body shaming, aren't we?
I
In
think so.
men.
Something like that. It's going to be very cool, whatever it
It
is.
is, unless something else comes up in the interim, which did this week. That's what we're going to be talking about next week. And we'll see you there. And we'll see you then.
Okay. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.